Hello from Halifax. This is Jo with Jo to the World Creations, and today we're going to be making my Snuggly baby blanket crochet pattern. This is an easy crochet blanket pattern that works up really quickly, and you can make it as a gorgeous throw blanket or as a beautiful baby blanket. We're going to be getting right to the video tutorial. All of the details such as the hook size, the amount of yarn required, as well as the step-by-step written instructions, they're all available entirely for free on my website, and there's a link to that in the description below this video. We're going to start by making a slip knot. This is how I make a slip knot. To make the blanket the size that's listed in the pattern, chain 90. For this video tutorial, I'll be making a small swatch and I'm going to chain 18. With your starting chains now made, we're going to begin row 1. For all of row 1, we are going to be working into the back ridge loops, which are these bumps along the back. We're going to start by working into the second chain from the hook. We're going to rotate our chains and insert our hook into the back ridge loop of this second chain right here. And into this second chain, we're going to single crochet. So here's our second chain. Rotate your work, insert your hook into the back ridge loop of that second chain, and single crochet. Now we're going to skip the next chain, so we're not working into that chain. In the next chain, we're going to make 3 double crochet stitches all in the same chain. Skip the next chain, in the next chain, 3 double crochet stitches, still working into that back ridge loop. And we're going to make 3 double crochet stitches all in the same chain. That's my first. There's my second. And there's my third. Now we're going to skip the next chain. Then we're going to start the repeat portion of the row, and these are the steps that we're going to be completing all the way across the row until there is 1 chain left. Here's what we're going to do. In the next chain, remember we're skipping the next and then beginning the repeat portion. In the next chain, we're going to single crochet. So we're skipping the next chain, in the next single crochet. Still continuing the repeat portion of the row, we're going to skip the next chain, and in the next chain, we're going to make 3 double crochet stitches all in the same chain. So skip the next, in the next chain, 3 double crochet stitches. There's 1. Two. There's 3. The last step in the repeat is to skip the next chain. Now we're going to do those steps one more time, and these are what you're going to repeat all the way across the row until there's 1 chain left. So let's do it together one more time. So the last step was to skip the next chain. In the next chain, single crochet. Skipping the next, in the next chain, single crochet. Skip the next chain, in the next chain, 3 double crochet stitches all in the same chain. There's 1. There's 2. And there's 3. and the next step is to skip the next chain. You go ahead and repeat this all the way across the row until you have one chain left. I've just repeated those steps all the way across the row. It looks like I have 2 chains left, but if you recall in that repeat, that last skip chain is part of the repeat instructions. So technically that's part of the repeat, and now I have 1 chain left to work into. This is the last chain right here, and into this last chain we're going to single crochet. So into this last chain, insert your hook into the back ridge loop just like you did for all the other chains, and single crochet. You can refer to the written instructions for the exact stitch count in each row. To start row 2, we are going to chain 2, 1, 2, and turn. We're going to start by working into this first stitch. This is the stitch that's attached to that chain 2 we just made. Into this first stitch, we are going to make 2 double crochet stitches into the same stitch. So working into this very first stitch, make 2 double crochet stitches. There's 1. There's 2. Next, we're going to skip the next stitch. So we're not working into that. In the next stitch, we're going to single crochet. And as you can see here, we're going to be working into the top of the middle double crochet stitch from the previous row. So into this stitch, we're going to single crochet, skipping the next stitch, into the next stitch, single crochet. Next, we will be skipping the next stitch. So we're not going to work into that. Now we're going to begin the repeat portion of the row. And this is what we're going to be repeating all the way across until there's 1 stitch left. In the next stitch, because remember we're skipping this stitch, into this stitch right here, which is the first step in our repeat, we're going to make 3 double crochet stitches all into this stitch. And I'll quickly point out that this stitch is the top of a single crochet stitch from the previous row. Skipping the next stitch, in the next stitch, 3 double crochet stitches. There's 1. There's 2. And there's 3. The next part of the repeat is to skip the next stitch. We'll be working into the next stitch. Right here, we're going to make 1 single crochet stitch. So skipping the next stitch, in the next stitch, single crochet. And the last part of the repeat is to skip the next stitch. So we'll be repeating these steps that we just did all the way across the row until there's 1 stitch left. Let's do this repeat one more time together. The last part of the repeat was to skip the next stitch. In the following stitch, the next stitch here, we're going to make 3 double crochet stitches. 1, 2, 3. Skip the next stitch, in the next stitch, single crochet. And then the last part of the repeat is to skip the next stitch. You go ahead and do this all the way across the row until you have 1 stitch left. I've just repeated that all the way across. It looks like I have 2 stitches left, but this next stitch here is part of the repeat. That's a stitch that we're skipping, so I only have 1 stitch left to work into. And into this last stitch, we're going to make 2 double crochet stitches into the last stitch. There's 1. And there's 2 double crochet stitches made in the last stitch. Once again, you can refer to the written instructions for the exact stitch count. As you are counting your stitches, please note that any chains that we make at the beginning of a row do not count as stitches. So only count your double crochet and single crochet stitches when you're counting. One other note is that you might find these first few rows bunch or curl a little bit, but they will flatten out as the blanket body grows. To start row 3, we're going to chain 1 and turn. We're going to be working in the very first stitch. This is the stitch that's attached to that chain 1 we just made. In this first stitch, we're going to make 1 single crochet stitch. We're going to skip the next stitch. In the next stitch, we're going to make 3 double crochet stitches in the same stitch. Skipping the next stitch, in the next stitch, 3 double crochet. There's 1. 2. There's 3. Next, we'll be skipping the next stitch, so we're not going to work into the next stitch. And now we're going to begin the repeat portion of the row, which is what we're going to be repeating all the way across until there's 1 stitch left. In this next stitch, remember we're skipping this stitch. In the next stitch, first part of the repeat, we're going to make a single crochet stitch. Once again, this is a single crochet in the top of the middle of the 3 double crochet stitches we made in the previous row. So skipping the next stitch, in the next stitch, single crochet. The next part of the repeat is to skip the next stitch, and in the next stitch, which I'll just point out here, is a single crochet stitch from the previous row, and into this stitch we'll be making 3 double crochet stitches. Skipping the next stitch, making 3 double crochet stitches. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3. And the last step in the repeat is to skip the next stitch. Let's repeat that one more time. So skipping the next stitch, in the next stitch, single crochet. Skip the next stitch, in the next stitch, make 3 double crochet stitches. There's 2. And the final step is to skip the next stitch. You go ahead and repeat those steps all the way across the row until you have 1 stitch left. I've just repeated those steps all the way across the row. Once again, it looks like we have 2 stitches left, but this second last stitch is included in the repeat. So we have 1 stitch left to work into, and into this last stitch, we are going to make 1 single crochet stitch. Skip the next stitch, in the last stitch, single crochet. For row 4 and on, you're going to repeat row 2 and row 3 consecutively until the height of your blanket body matches the width. That's for a square blanket, or your desired height. For reference, my completed blanket body was approximately 31 inches high, which was 63 rows. Once you've reached your desired height, or those measurements, do not fasten off. You want to ensure that the last row of your blanket body is a row 3. Now that doesn't mean to repeat row 3 twice, it just means to be following the pattern, making row 2 and then row 3, and after you've completed a row 3, come back to the video and we'll do the border together. Now we're going to start the blanket border. I've just completed a repeat of row 3. My last stitch was a single crochet stitch in the last stitch, and you can tell that you've just completed a row 3 because the starting tail should be on your left. This blanket is completely reversible. However, this is technically the right side or the front, and after completing a row 3, the front or right side of the blanket should be facing you. To start border round 1, we are going to chain 1. We are not going to turn. We're going to start by single crocheting evenly down the side. I'm going to rotate my work so it's easier to work into. When single crocheting evenly down the side, you can work into 1 loop of the stitches and chains at the ends of each row, or you can work into 2 loops, or you can even work into the spaces around the stitches. The exact stitch count and the exact stitch placement are not important. The goal is to have evenly spaced out single crochet stitches all the way down the side. If you need help with where to work into, every time you see a chain 2, here's a chain 2 right here, I worked 1 single crochet near the top of that chain 2 and 1 single crochet near the bottom of it. Every time I saw a single crochet stitch, here's a single crochet stitch, I worked 1 single crochet stitch into that single crochet stitch. This helped me get evenly spaced out single crochet stitches all the way down the side. So I've just chained 1. I'm coming up to a single crochet stitch right here. So I'm going to insert my hook into that single crochet stitch and single crochet. Now I'm at a chain 2, and again the exact stitch placement is not important, but I'm going to make a single crochet near the top of this chain 2 and a single crochet stitch. I'm going to make it right near the bottom or even in the middle of it. And again, where you make your stitches is not important, but you do want to have them evenly spaced out. So you can use these stitches and chains as guides to ensure your stitches are spaced out. Here I'm at a single crochet stitch, so I'm going to make a single crochet stitch into that single crochet stitch. Now I'm at a chain 2 again, so I'm going to make one near the top of that chain 2. And now I'm going to make a single crochet near the bottom, or it's actually right into that chain 2. You go ahead and make single crochet stitches all the way down the side. After single crocheting evenly all the way down the side, rotate your work so that you can work along the bottom. We're going to work into the very first chain along the bottom. We're going to work under both loops for this first chain. Into this first chain, we're going to make 3 single crochet stitches into this first chain. So this is the chain that's attached to the slip knot that we made that began the pattern. And into this chain under both loops, we're going to single crochet 3 times into the same chain. This is going to create our first corner. Make 3 single crochet stitches all into the same chain. Next, we're going to single crochet in each chain all the way across the bottom until there's 1 chain left. If you recall, when we worked into the chains in row 1, we skipped a number of chains, so we only worked into some of them. When making our single crochet stitches into each chain across the bottom, when we come across a skipped chain, so this next one that I'm going to work into is a skip chain, meaning that we didn't actually make a stitch into it, and these skipped chains become very tight. So I found it was almost impossible to work under both loops of these skip chains. So when you come across a skip chain, just work into the front loop only, which is the loop closest to you. So this next chain here, we're going to single crochet in the front loop, this loop only, of the next chain. So working into this next chain, we're going to insert our hook onto the front loop only, and it can still be quite tight. Take your time, and then single crochet. The next chain is a chain where there was a stitch made into it, so it's much easier to work under both loops. So working under both loops, we'll single crochet in the next chain. So every time you come across a chain that's been skipped, just work into the front loop only and single crochet. And then when you come across a chain that's been worked in, work under both loops and single crochet. And do this all the way across until there is one chain left. I've just single crocheted all the way across, and now I have one chain left. Working into this last chain across the bottom, work under both loops, and into this last chain we're going to make 3 single crochet stitches in the same chain. So working in this last chain, make 3 single crochet stitches, and this is going to create our second corner. Now we're going to single crochet evenly up the side. So rotate your work, and just like we did when we worked down the side, we can work into 1 loop or 2 loops or spaces around the stitches. In case you need help with where to work into, every time I saw a double crochet stitch, I worked 1 single crochet in the bottom and 1 single crochet in the top. And whenever I saw a chain 1, I would make 1 single crochet into or near that chain 1. So here's another double crochet, single crochet in the bottom, single crochet in the top. Here's a chain 1, work a single crochet stitch around that chain 1. So I'm going to go right into working into this double crochet stitch here, and I'm going to go right working into the stitch and make a single crochet in the bottom of that double crochet stitch, and then find a spot to work a single crochet stitch in the top of it. Now I'm at a chain 1. I find it was very difficult to work into the chain 1, so I'm going to find a spot nearby right above it here and single crochet. Now I'm at this double crochet, so I'm going to work my single crochets into it and into the top of that same double crochet stitch, make a single crochet near the top. And then here's another chain. I'm going to make a single crochet right near that chain 1. You go ahead and do that all the way up the side. Now we're going to work into the stitches across the top. We're going to start by working into the very first stitch across the top. Into this first stitch, working normally as we would into the top of the stitch under both loops, we're going to make 3 single crochet stitches in the same first stitch. So working into this first stitch across the top, make 3 single crochet stitches, and this creates our third corner. Now we're going to single crochet in each stitch all the way across the top until there is 1 stitch left, and just make 1 single crochet stitch in each stitch all the way across the top until there's 1 stitch left. I'm almost finished single crocheting across the top. I have 2 stitches left to work into, so I'm going to make my final single crochet before that last stitch. And into this last stitch, across the top, we're going to make 3 single crochet stitches into this stitch. Working into this last stitch, we're going to make our 4th and final corner by making 3 single crochet stitches in the same stitch. To finish the round, we are going to slip stitch in the top of this first single crochet stitch that we made in the round to join. So working into this first single crochet stitch, insert your hook under both loops and slip stitch. To help prepare for the corners for the next round, we're going to take stitch markers, and they don't need to be all different colors. You can use safety pins, you can use scraps of yarn. We just need something to identify the corners because that's going to help us for the next part of the border. We're going to place stitch markers in the 4 corner stitches. Let's start with the first corner stitch. The corner stitch is the middle of the 3 single crochet stitches that we made in the corner when we did border round 1. And we're going to place a stitch marker in this corner stitch. Now go ahead and place another stitch marker in the second corner. Here's a stitch marker in the third corner. And for this last corner, let's take a close look at this. Here's the slip stitch that we made to join the round. And if you back up, you'll see the 3 single crochet stitches made in the last corner. And we're going to place a stitch marker in the middle of those 3 single crochet stitches. And now we have stitch markers in the 4 corner stitches. Now we're going to start border round 2. This is the border ribbing. Let's begin with step 1. We are not going to turn. We're going to start by chaining 9. 1, 2. And these chains are going to determine the size of our border. You can adjust the size by making more or less chains in this step. You can make any number of chains, there's no specific multiple required. Making 9 chains, as I've just done here, creates a border that's approximately 2 inches away from the blanket body. I'm just rotating my work here so it's easier to work into. We're going to start by working into the second chain from the hook. So here's the first, here's the second. And we're going to insert our hook under the top loop of this second chain. And then we're going to single crochet. So working into the second chain from the hook under the top loop, insert your hook under that top loop and single crochet. Next, we're going to work into the top loop of each chain all the way down. So working into this next chain here under the top loop, single crochet. Here's my next chain, single crochet. So I've now made 2 single crochet stitches, and we're going to single crochet in each chain all the way down, working in each chain always into the top loop until we have a total of 8 single crochet stitches made in total. I now have 2 more chains to work into. This is my second last chain, single crochet, and here's my last chain, still working under that top loop, single crochet. Now we're going to slip stitch into the first stitch from the blanket body, and this is the stitch that's attached to these chains. We're simply going to slip stitch directly into this first stitch. So working right into this first stitch, slip stitch. And now we're going to make another slip stitch into the next stitch on the blanket body. So working right into that next stitch, make another slip stitch. So we have 2 slip stitches made and 8 single crochet stitches made. Now we're going to start the ribbing up. We're going to chain 1 and we're going to turn our work. Here's the chain 1 we just made, followed by those 2 slip stitches. We are not going to work into those 2 slip stitches. So we're going to skip those 2 slip stitches and go right into working into those 8 single crochet stitches that we made. And we are going to be working into the back loop only, which is the loop that's furthest away from you. We're going to insert our hook into the back loop only of the first single crochet stitch and single crochet. And we're going to be working into the back loops only of each of the single crochet stitches all the way up. So once again, here's the chain. Here are those 2 slip stitches, which we're going to skip over. Go directly to working into the first single crochet stitch. Insert your hook into the back loop only and single crochet. Working into the next single crochet stitch, insert your hook into the back loop only and single crochet. And you're going to do this all the way up. You will have a total of 8 single crochet stitches made, and always working into the back loop only, that loop that is furthest away from you. I'm on my last stitch to work into. This is the last single crochet stitch, but once again, only working into the back loop only. Make your last single crochet stitch right here. Inserting my hook into the back loop only and single crochet. Now we're going to start the ribbing down. Just start the ribbing down. We're going to chain 1 and we're going to turn. Here's this chain 1 we just made. We're going to start by working into the very last single crochet stitch that we made when we did the ribbing up. And once again, for the ribbing down, we're only going to work into the back loops only. And we're going to single crochet in the back loops only of each single crochet stitch all the way back down to the blanket body. Now this last stitch can get quite tight. Once again, we're only going to work into the back loop of it, but just make sure as you're working down, always count your stitches. You should always have a total of 8 single crochet stitches all the way up and all the way down. So here's the chain. I'm going to insert my hook into the first single crochet stitch, into the back loop only, and single crochet. Working to the next stitch, back loop only, single crochet. And we're going to do this all the way down. There's 4 stitches, 5, 6, 7, and here's that last stitch, but remember it can get very tight, so just make sure to count and still work into the back loop only. And there's 8. From this point forward, we are always going to be making a slip stitch in the stitch that's next to the stitch that's attached to the ribbing. Let's take a close look here. Here's the ribbing right here, and this is the stitch that's attached to this ribbing. We're always going to be working into the next stitch on the blanket body. So this is a stitch, it's not attached to the ribbing. The instructions say to slip stitch in the next 2 stitches. So again, don't work into the stitch attached to the ribbing. In the next stitch is your first slip stitch where we're going to attach the ribbing to the blanket body in this stitch right here. The instructions say to slip stitch into the next 2 stitches. So here's your first and here's your second. If you find when making this border that making 2 slip stitches is causing your border to stretch too much or be too tight, because it does depend on how tightly you crochet, you can choose to only make 1 slip stitch. Just ensure that when you're making this 1 slip stitch, you're making it into the stitch that's not attached to the ribbing. You can even experiment to see what works best with you. You could alternate between making just 1 slip stitch, and then the next time you're going to join, you could make 2 slip stitches. You can experiment with what works best for you. I did find that for me, when I made slip stitches just 1, my border was really ruffled and wavy. Now you might like that look, so feel free to experiment with how many slip stitches you make. That's up to you. For the rest of the blanket video and all throughout the written pattern, I make my slip stitches in the next 2 stitches. I know that was a long ramble, but I think it's really important to provide options if you're finding that the border is too tight, or if you want a wavy, ruffled border. How to do that is by changing your number of slip stitches when attaching the ribbing to the blanket body. So no matter what you do, skip the stitch that's attached to the ribbing and slip stitch into the next stitch, and I'll be slip stitching into the next stitch and the next stitch after that. So skipping the stitch attached to the ribbing, and then make a slip stitch in the next stitch, and make a slip stitch in the next stitch. Now we're going to repeat ribbing up and ribbing down all the way until we get to the next corner. Let's do ribbing up and ribbing down one more time together. For ribbing up, we're going to chain 1 and turn. Here's the chain. Then we're going to skip the slip stitches, the 2 slip stitches that we made, and we're going to single crochet in the back loops only of each of these single crochet stitches all the way up. Here's my last stitch that I'm going to work into the back loop, single crochet. Now for ribbing down, we're going to chain 1 and turn. We're going to single crochet in the back loops only of each stitch all the way down. There's 7, and there's my 8th stitch, which can get quite tight. Here's the stitch attached to the ribbing. We are going to skip this, never work into this, and then slip stitch in the next 2 stitches. Skip that stitch in the next stitch, slip stitch, and slip stitch. You go ahead and repeat ribbing up and ribbing down all the way until the stitch before the corner stitch. So you're going to want to stop right here and come back to the video. I'm nearing the corner here. I've just completed ribbing down, and I'm about to make my 2 slip stitches. As you know, we never slip stitch into the stitch that's attached to the ribbing. So when I make my 2 slip stitches, that means my last slip stitch is the stitch before the corner stitch. But I wanted to point out that it doesn't matter if you have 2 slip stitches like I do in this case. The moment you make a slip stitch into the stitch before the corner, that's when you're going to start these corner instructions. And it's okay if you've just made 1 instead of 2 slip stitches into this stitch before the corner stitch. The instructions for this first corner are the same thing that you're going to be doing in each of the 4 corners. So I'm going to finish this part of the ribbing down by making my 2 slip stitches. And again, if you just have 1 slip stitch as you approach the corner, that's absolutely okay. Now we can remove this stitch marker. We're going to repeat the following instructions a total of 3 times. We're going to rib up, so chain 1 and turn. We're going to skip the slip stitches. I have 2, but if you only have 1, that's okay. Just skip any slip stitches. And now we're going to rib up normally by single crocheting in the back loops only of each single crochet stitch all the way up. So skip those slip stitches and single crochet in the back loop only. I've just completed ribbing up. Now we're going to rib down. So chain 1 and turn and single crochet in the back loop only of each stitch all the way down. I've just finished ribbing all the way down, and now we're going to slip stitch into this corner stitch. Skip the stitch that's attached to the ribbing into the corner stitch, slip stitch. That completes those set of instructions once, and we're going to do it a total of 3 times. So a little faster now. I'm going to chain 1, turn, skip the slip stitch, single crochet in the back loop only of each stitch all the way up. There's my ribbing up. Now we're going to rib down, chain 1 and turn, single crochet, back loops only of each stitch all the way down. There's my 8 single crochet stitches now complete. Now we're going to slip stitch in the same corner stitch that we made our previous slip stitch in. So we're going to slip stitch right in this corner stitch. Right here, make our slip stitch. And that completes those instructions twice. We're going to do it one more time. We're going to rib up, chain 1, and turn, skip the slip stitch, single crochet in each stitch all the way up, in the back loops only, of course. After ribbing all the way up, we're going to rib down, chain 1, and turn, single crochet in the back loop only of each stitch all the way down. I've just finished ribbing all the way down, and we're going to slip stitch into the same corner stitch. After making this slip stitch, we'll have a total of 3 slip stitches all into the same corner stitch. So working into the same stitch, slip stitch. After that 3rd slip stitch, we are going to now complete the ribbing up and ribbing down. I'm going to chain 1 and turn, skip over that slip stitch and single crochet in the back loop only of each stitch up. After ribbing up, we're going to chain 1 and turn and single crochet in the back loop only of each stitch all the way down. Just finish ribbing down, and now we're going to slip stitch. Just make one slip stitch in the next stitch, not the stitch attached to the ribbing, which was the corner stitch. We're going to slip stitch one time into the next stitch on the blanket body. So working into the next stitch, slip stitch. That completes the instructions for the corners. We're now going to resume ribbing up and ribbing down until the stitch before the next corner. Really quickly here to resume ribbing up and down, we're just going to chain one and turn, skip over that one slip stitch, single crochet, back loop only of each stitch up. After ribbing up, chain one and turn, and then rib down. I've just finished ribbing down. Since we're now resuming our main set of instructions, now that we're finished that corner, we're going to go back to making a slip stitch in the next 2 stitches. Again, skip the stitch that's attached to the ribbing and then slip stitch in the next 2 stitches. So resume ribbing up and down until you get to the stitch before the next corner stitch, and at that point follow the instructions for the corner that we just did. And you're going to repeat those instructions all the way around. Even for that last corner, repeat the instructions that we just did. After making a slip stitch in the stitch after the corner, come back to the video and we will finish the blanket together. I'm on my 4th and final corner here. I've just made my 3 slip stitches into the corner stitch, and then I've ribbed up and then ribbed down, and I'm about to slip stitch into the last stitch on the blanket body. So here I'm going to make my last slip stitch in the blanket body. And now we're going to repeat ribbing up and down one more time. So chain one and turn. Skip over the slip stitch, just like always. Single crochet in the back loops only of each stitch all the way up. There, I've just completed my ribbing up. We're going to chain one and turn, and then complete the ribbing down. I've just completed ribbing all the way down. The final step is to make another slip stitch into this last stitch. So there'll be 2 slip stitches into this very last stitch. Into this last stitch, slip stitch. Now we can remove our hook. And we're going to cut the yarn that's attached to our skein, and we're going to leave an approximate 24-inch tail because we want enough yarn that we can sew the 2 sides, the start and the end, together. So cut your yarn from your skein, leaving approximately 24-inch tail. Now we're going to pull the tail through the loop that was on your hook. So use your fingers, grab the tail and pull it through. And pull tight. Now we're going to put this yarn on a yarn needle. We're going to sew the start, which are the chain stitches that we made to start border round 2, the border ribbing. These are on our left. And we're going to sew the start and the end together. And the end is the single crochet stitches that we made when we ribbed down, and these single crochet stitches are on our right. We're going to start by inserting our yarn needle into the first chain stitch on our left. We're going to insert our needle from back to front, and we're going to start with the very first chain right here, and we're going to insert our needle from back to front under the back loop of this first chain. Technically, this is called the back ridge loop of the chain. It's the loop furthest away from us. So insert your needle from back to front, coming out under that back ridge loop or the back loop, and then pull the yarn through. Now we're going to work into the single crochet stitches on our right, and with our needle, we're going to put our needle in the front loop only, coming from back to front, under the front loop only of that first stitch. So coming from back to front under the front loop only, and then pull that yarn all the way through. And we're going to repeat this all the way up. Find the next chain. Here's the next chain right here. Here's that back ridge loop or the back loop only. Insert your needle from back to front under the back loop only and pull the yarn through. Now go to the next single crochet stitch that we haven't worked in yet. Here's the next stitch right here. We're going to insert our hook from back to front under the front loop only and pull the yarn through. And we're going to do this all the way up, working into the next chain. Under that back loop, pull the yarn through, and then find the next single crochet stitch on the right side here under the front loop only. And you keep doing this all the way up. I have 2 chains left on the left side and 2 stitches on the right side. Still doing the same thing in the second last chain, back to front under that back loop, pull the yarn through. You can get a little trickier to see as you near the top here. Here's my second last single crochet stitch here. See those loops? Under the front loop only, from back to front. And now I'm on my last chain and my last stitch. We're going to do the same thing, find that back loop, and this one can get really tricky because this last chain can be quite small, this back loop here. Find that little back bump, pull your needle and yarn through from back to front, and then working into the last stitch on the right front loop only from back to front. Now I found I wanted to do what I just did on that last stitch one more time just to make sure it's even. So bring my yarn back, going under that same back loop that I just did on that last stitch. I'm going to do it one more time in the same place, and then find that front loop that I just did on that last stitch here. I just felt doing it one or even 2 more times really helped make that top a little more even. Once you're happy with how that top looks, all that's left to do is still with your yarn needle weave in all your loose ends. But I found sewing it together like that created an almost completely invisible join, which I think is a great way to end this blanket. Here it is on the other side, also almost completely invisible where we joined. And that concludes this video tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoy making this blanket. I would love to see your finished blankets. I am here if you have any questions or if there's anything at all I can do to help, please let me know. Thank you again and have a wonderful day.